Hello there, Jack from Junior Game Creators here. Today we're going to be making a game called Color Capture. Now, it's a arcade style game in which you have to catch colored balls that rain from the sky, and you can only collect the ones that match the color of your paddle. So there's an added layer of challenge to this game. The coding is intermediate, it's not too complicated, but it's a really fun game that I think you're going to enjoy playing a lot, especially if you're going to go for a high score challenge. So let's get started. We're going to need a blank sprite to start with to keep our game loop or game engine on. So let's delete poor old Scratch Cat here and create a new sprite that we're going to paint, although we're not going to fill anything in. And we're going to rename it to Game Engine. This is how almost all of our games start. It just helps keep everything tidy and neat, and the game runs a lot smoother as a result. So we're going to start adding code to our game engine loop here. This is the only place we'll use the when green flag clicked hat, and it's going to make sure that everything else runs with broadcasted messages. So we're going to broadcast a new message straight away that says new game. So when we click the green flag, we know we're starting a new game. Then we're going to create two variables. We want to track time in this, and we want to track score. Each game's going to last for 1 minute or 60 seconds, and we want to increase our score when we score a point and decrease it when we get something wrong. So let's create a variable and we'll call it time. And we'll create another variable and we'll call it score. So to start with, we always want our score to be 0. You start off with no points. And we want our time to start at 60 because we're going to be counting down from 60 seconds so that the game lasts for a minute. We're also going to create a third variable here, which we're going to call high score. And this will mean that every time someone plays it, we can track who's got the best score over a minute. But we don't want to see that one right away. So we're going to pop in a block that says hide variable high score. We're going to wait a second because we don't want the player to go straight into the game. We want to give them a chance to get going. And then we're going to broadcast a message that says start game. Smash him. Everything's set up to begin. All right, we've got our time, we've got our score. Nothing's happening yet, but we know that every time we start the game, this is what we're going to come back to. So when the game starts, we want to make sure that our timer ticks down by 1 every second. So let's use a forever block here. And we're going to wait a second. Then we're going to change our time by -1 because we want it to tick down. And we want to make sure that when our timer runs out, everything finishes. So we're going to say if our timer is less than 1, let's grab our time. If it comes out to less than 1, which will be 0 because we're always going down by 1 at a time. If time is less than 1, we're going to broadcast a message that says end. And that's what we're going to use to stop everything else in our game. Fantastic. Let's just check our timer runs as it should. There we go, 59, 58, 57, and you know the rest. Now, what do we want to happen when the game finishes? We want to stop everything else, and we want to show our high score. So when the game ends, we're going to forever, if our score is greater than our high score, then we want to set our high score to be equal to our score. Now this is a little block of code that we use a lot in Gamewagon, and it's just a really simple, really neat way to show the high score. So we'll take a greater than block and plop it in here, and we're going to say if our score is higher than our high score, so if we get 30 this time and our last high score was 20, then we want to set our high score, which was 20, to be the same as our score, which is now 30. Sounds confusing, but in practice you'll get it really quickly, I'm sure. And it's a very useful block to learn, okay? And the more you use it, the more you'll understand it. Then we want to be able to see what our high score is. So we're going to show the variable high score, and then we're going to stop everything else because we don't want anything to keep running after this. Excellent. We've now got the basic loop of our game running. And if I let this run for a minute, it would stop at 0. But we're not going to do that because that would be super boring to watch. So let's get some sprites going in this game. We need a color catcher, something that we control, a little paddle that we move backwards and forwards. And we need different colored balls. And we want those to match. We want a blue one and an orange one for each, so that you can only collect blue balls with a blue paddle and orange balls with an orange paddle. So let's open a new sprite from our library and go into things. And I'm going to use this button here as a way to set up our color catcher. So I'm going to open our button 2. I'm going to go into costumes, and you can see I've already got a blue one and an orange one, which is really handy. So I'm going to rename this to color catcher. And I'm going to rename our costumes here to blue and orange. Now you'll notice that the blue one is in position 1 and the orange one is in position 2. That's really important. We'll come back to that in a second. Now let's get a ball going. So we've got a ball here that's orange. We're going to open that up, have a look at our costumes, and you see we've got lots of different color options for our balls here, but we only want to deal with blue and orange. So let's delete pink, delete green, and delete purple. Now remember I said just now that we've got blue in position 1 and orange in position 2. We need that to match up with the ball. So we're going to click the orange, drag it down, and now blue is on top and orange is on bottom. So let's just rename those so that we can keep track of them. And we've got the sprites that we're going to be using. So let's start with our color catcher. We want the color catcher to be controlled with the mouse. So when I move my mouse backwards and forwards across the screen, our color catcher will follow. And we're going to use a little trick with this so that it's nice and smooth movement, and it will really improve the overall feel of the game, something that's super important and often quite hard to put into words. If the color catcher just stuck to our mouse exactly, it would feel a lot different to what we're going to do. So let's start by initializing it, or telling it where to go at the start. So we're going to use our message, when I receive new game, go to the center, left and right wise anyway, and Y we want it to stay at the bottom, so somewhere around here. Let's do about minus 140, I think would be a good spot for it to be. Remember, it follows the center of the sprite, so we'll do minus 140. Let's check that. Hey, that's a good position. I think it's not too far from the bottom, and it's going to be moving smoothly backwards and forwards here. So that's where we always end up at the start, and hopefully it's not going to move up or down at any point. It shouldn't do unless we put in code to tell it that. So what happens when the game starts? We want to be able to control this thing, so we're going to use when I receive start game, switch the costume to blue. We want everything to start on blue. It's going to make our life a lot easier. And we're going to say forever if it does one thing, do this, and if it does something else, do a different thing. So if else is what we need here. Now bear with me, this is a little bit complicated, but it's going to mean we get this nice smooth movement. So if you're stuck at any point, just pause the video, rewind, listen to me again, have a close look at where the mouse cursor is going, and see if you can figure out what's going on. So essentially what I want is, if the mouse is on one side of the color catcher, we want the color catcher to move towards it. And if it's on the other side, we want it to move towards it that way. But we don't want it to just stick to it. The closer it gets to the mouse, the slower we want the color catcher to go. Say you were in a car and you were about to park, you don't go speeding into a parking space, you slow down as you get closer. Everything's a lot more smooth that way. So let's start by determining our if statement here. We're going to take a less than block. We're going to take the X position of our color catcher, so the left or right position of it, and we want the X position of our mouse as well, which should be just here. and we're going to plot this in. So if the X position of our color catcher is less than the X position of our mouse. So at the moment it is. The X position of our mouse is 47. You can see just down here. And the X position of our color catcher is about minus 83. So this is true at the moment. It is less than. If the mouse is on the right of the color catcher X position is less than the mouse X position. So we want to change the color catcher's X position by the distance between the mouse cursor and the color catcher divided by 10. Okay, the distance between the mouse cursor and the color catcher divided by 10. So let's go to our operators block and grab all the little bits and pieces we're going to need. So we'll take a x minus x and we'll take a x divided by x. We're going to plop the division one in first because that's what we want to happen last. And we're going to plop our -1 in the start here. We're going to take a mouse X position value. We're going to take a color catcher X position value. And we're going to drop them in so that the X position of our color catcher and our mouse X position are just here. So mouse X minus X position divided by 10. Because if we didn't divide it by 10, it would be such a huge number, you wouldn't feel this smooth movement. So we're going to change X by the distance between the mouse and the color catcher, but we don't want it to go all at once, so we're going to divide it by 10. Simple. And we're going to do the same thing if the mouse is on the left. So I'm going to duplicate this whole block and plop it in here. Let's test it out. So you see this nice smooth movement where the color catcher is following our mouse, but it's not sticking to it. If I move quickly, you see the color catcher speeds up to catch up to the mouse and then slows down when it gets close. And there's no wobbling. Yeah, there's no glitching out. We've just got this lovely smooth movement, and it's really going to improve the feel of the game. So it might be complicated, but I think it's really worth it. So spend a little bit of time looking at this and seeing if you can figure out the maths involved. One really useful thing to do is to write it out on a piece of paper. That can really help you figure out what's going on. So we've got our color catcher. He's moving nice and smoothly, but what are our balls doing at the moment? Nothing. So let's head over to the ball, and we're going to start programming in our code, and we're going to be using a lot of clone buttons here, and this is going to mean that we only need one sprite, but we can clone it lots and lots of times. So let's initialize it. When I receive new game, we don't want to see the original sprite, we only want to see the clones, so we're going to hide it. Okay, and when the game starts, we're going to spawn lots of clones of our ball. Now, we want this game to get more difficult as time goes on. We don't want it to just stay the same for a minute because that would be kind of boring. So we're going to start off with just a few balls, one after the other, and then later and later throughout the game, the balls are going to get faster and faster and faster, and it's going to get really crazy and frantic at the end. So here's a little bit of maths we can use. We're going to use the forever block because we always want to spawn balls throughout the whole game. We're going to wait for a certain amount of time, and we're going to use the timer to tell us how long we're going to wait. Now, if we just set it to timer, you'd wait a whole minute before you got the ball and you'd never get any balls. So we're going to divide our timer by 20. So time divided by 20. So let's start, and our timer is 60 at the moment. So when the game starts, we're going to do 60 divided by 20, which is quite a long time. At the moment, it would be 6 seconds, and then divide that by 2. It's 3 seconds. So we're waiting 3 seconds for our first ball to come. But as the timer counts down, that time's going to get shorter and shorter. So if the timer was at 10 seconds, we're only waiting half a second for the next ball. Okay, it means that it's going to get faster and faster and faster. So we've got these clones coming, but what do they do when the clones arrive? Okay, so when I start as a clone, we want to go to the top of the screen. So Y is all going to be all the way at the top, 180, because that's the highest up Y value you can have. But we want them to spawn in a random place along the top here. We don't want them all coming in one line because you'd never have to move your color catcher. It'd be super boring. We're going to spawn them between roughly here and roughly here. So we'll use our random number generator, and we're going to spawn them between about minus 170, which is about, where's that? That's about here, yeah, and between 170, so about here, somewhere in this region, okay? That way they're not spawning all the way off the edge of the screen and you can't possibly get to them in time. Now, costumes are super important in this game, and we want to switch our costume to orange or blue at random, but we can't randomly say orange or blue. We need to use numbers if we want to be random. Now remember, we put the blue at the first position and orange at the second position. Scratch always assigns a costume number to your costumes. 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, 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 if we had lots more. Okay, and 1's always at the top and counting down from there. Now that means we can use the random number generator because our costumes have a number value. Blue is costume 1 and orange is costume 2. So we're going to take a random number block and we're going to pick random number between 1 and 2. That way it's always going to come out with 1 or 2. We want to see the ball because remember we hit it at the start, so we're going to add a show block. And then we're going to glide it to the bottom of the screen. Now, glide is super useful if you're ever trying to create movement that follows a track. So something like a bullet or a train or an enemy that never changes direction, it just goes in a straight line. So using our glide block here, we're going to glide for 1 second to X position. So we don't want it to veer off in any other direction. We want it to stay in the position it's in, but we want it to glide all the way to the bottom of the screen, which is minus 180. And when it gets there, we delete the clone. Now, is there something I'm forgetting? Let's have a look back over our code. When we receive the new game, hide. Excellent. When I receive start game, wait. So it's counting down with our timer. But we're not telling it to create any clones. Easy mistake to make. It's always worth double checking your code, and this is why we test as we go along. So let's get create clone of myself, and we pop it in after our timer there. That way, when we start as a clone, it runs this little block of code here. Let's test it again. We should have balls flying at the color catcher any minute now. Here they come. Brilliant. And are they appearing in a random costume? We've only seen orange so far. There's a blue. We can't do anything with our color catcher. We're not interacting with it in any way yet, but we know our balls are coming. And let's just wait and see if they speed up at all. So we're down to 42 seconds now. They should be coming a little bit quicker. They are. Fantastic. Halfway through the game nearly, and the balls are coming much faster. It would be a lot more difficult, I think, if I was actually playing the game now. I don't want to spoil the ending just yet. We're going to see that in a minute, but we know our balls are working. Excellent. Now what we need to do is make sure that we're getting points for catching the correct color. We only want to be able to catch blue with the blue paddle and orange with the orange paddle. So let's go back to our color catcher and set up a system that will allow us to switch colors whenever we want to. Now, super easy way of doing this. We're going to use a events block that says when space key is pressed, next costume. So we've only got 2 costumes and they cycle round. So if I switch next costume here, it will go to orange. Next costume here, it will go back to blue, orange, blue. So hitting space will always switch backwards and forwards when you've only got 2. Let's test it out. There we go. I can switch between orange paddle and blue paddle whenever I want. So now we need to set up our scoring. Back to our ball sprite. And we're going to create a situation where hitting the ball on the blue paddle when it's a blue ball will give us a point. Hitting the paddle with the orange ball when it's a blue paddle will lose a point. So you've got to match the colours. So let's have another when I start as a clone block, because we want these 2 things to run simultaneously whenever you start as a clone. We need a forever because we're going to be running everything throughout the whole game. We need a if block because we want to check if you're actually touching the color catcher before we even check the color. So let's have a look. If touching color catcher. And then we want to check that the costumes match. Now remember, we've got blue on 1, orange on 2, blue on 1, orange on 2. Now, that's really important because we want to be able to check the costume numbers and make sure that they match. It's the easiest way of doing this. So let's get another if-else block. One thing for if the colors match, one thing for if they don't match. So let's grab some blocks that we're going to need to check this out. So equals, we want to know if these costume numbers equal one another or not. We want to check the costume number of our catcher. So in sensing, we've got this super useful block down here. Now, I'm not sure how many people realize this, but there's lots of different options you can use to check the different values of a sprite or a costume or a position of a sprite. And you can check that against all different sprites as well. So let's use costume number of color catcher. If that is equal to the costume number of our ball, so if these two numbers are equal, so 1 and 1 or 2 and 2, then we want to change our score by 1. So you get 1 point for a correct match. And then we want to delete the clone because you've caught it. We don't want it to keep going past. If these numbers don't match, so if you've got costume 1 on your color catcher and costume 2 on your ball, that means you've got a blue color catcher and an orange ball. And if you're catching that, you need to start losing points. So we're going to go back to our data. We're going to change score by -1. And then we're going to delete that clone. We don't want it to keep going after, otherwise we're going to end up losing loads of points. So let's test this out. Let's see if our score changes. Our paddle's moving. Our paddle's changing colour. And I'm catching balls. So orange, I got 1 point. Wrong colour, I lost a point. Right colour, I gain a point. Right colour, I gain a point. Wrong colour, I lose a point. And this works for both colours. Fantastic. So we've got the fundamentals of our game working here. We need to set some parameters for when the game ends, though. So when the game ends, the time is up at 60 seconds, and we know it's going to broadcast this message end. So we can send messages to all of our other sprites to stop doing stuff at the end. So when I receive end, we're going to stop other scripts in this sprite. And we're going to do the same for our ball. When I receive end, stop other scripts in this sprite. So our game works. It runs. It should go for a whole minute. We haven't tested it just yet. The background's a bit boring. Why don't we jazz that up quickly? Click on our backdrops. Choose a new backdrop from library. I think something a bit abstract, a bit colourful would work here. We got the blues and oranges. A green and white would look good. Nice. That's changed things quite quickly, I think. Made everything look a little jazzier. And everything's running. But we still can't see our high score. So let's go back to our game engine. Double check our high score is all in position. I think we may be finished. Should we give it a test? I always like to go full screen for my big first test of a game. And we're going to play for a whole minute, and you'll see just how crazy this game gets towards the end. And we can check if our high score system is working as well. So keep an eye on the score and make sure everything's working as it should. And don't laugh at me if I'm rubbish at this. Oh, there we go. Straight away I've missed one. I tell you what, this is quite an addicting and challenging game. Getting those oranges. Not too fast once you get into it at the moment. Blues. Starting to pick up pace now, I can feel it. It's when you have to switch backwards and forwards like this that it gets really tricky. A few oranges in a row, that's made my life a bit easier. Things getting super quick now towards the end. Oh, it could be so confusing even if you think you've got the right one. Oh no, here we go. Last 10 seconds. No, there's way too many. This is madness. 35, rubbish. I know I've got 50 before, but I'm sure that number can be beat. Have a go at remixing this yourself once you've made it. There's lots and lots of ways you can modify this game. You can make more balls come. You could add more colours so that you've got 3 or 4 colours to cycle through. You could add power-ups. You could increase the speed of your paddle, your colour catcher. You could even add a much more interesting background than just these squiggly lines. I mean, I think it looks nice, but it's not particularly exciting. I'd really love to see the remixes you do, so make sure you head over to the Junior Game Creator Scratch page and remix this game from there. And we'll be able to see all the fantastic versions of this game that you make. Enjoy playing it, and maybe get some other people to have a go at the game as well that might not play games too often. It's very easy to pick up, but it can be quite exciting. Good luck with making your own game, and let us know what you think. Thanks very much. Bye.